The story begins in a secluded village graveyard, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. A group of villagers gathers around a freshly dug grave, where a man is buried directly in the ground, wrapped in a white shroud. Only his face, pale and serene, is visible. The air is thick with whispers and unease. An elderly woman, the village matriarch, steps forward, holding a wooden staff. Her voice trembles as she speaks. This man was no ordinary villager. He carried secrets so dark, even the earth may reject him. The villagers exchange nervous glances. As the elder speaks, a sudden rustling draws everyone's attention. Emerging from the grass is a snake, its golden eyes glowing in the dim light. The villagers step back in alarm as the serpent slithers toward the grave and coils itself near the man's head. An older villager breaks the silence. I knew him. He was once a merchant, wealthy and proud, but he ruined lives for his gain. Perhaps the snake is here to guard his soul or punish him. The elder continues, her tone heavy. This man stole from the poor, betrayed his kin, and desecrated sacred ground. The earth itself might be rejecting his presence. A faint tremor shakes the ground, sending chills through the crowd. The villagers decide to leave the graveyard as darkness falls, but unease lingers in the air. Some claim they hear faint hissing sounds as they walk back to their homes. Others murmur about curses. The elder stays behind, her eyes fixed on the snake. That night, the villagers experience restless sleep. Many dream of the buried man, his eyes open and pleading for forgiveness. In every dream, the golden-eyed snake watches silently from a distance. The next morning, the villagers gather in the square to discuss the strange events. Some want to exhume the body, fearing it will bring misfortune, while others insist on leaving it undisturbed. The elder warns against rash actions. A man named Khalid steps forward, trembling. I knew him, he says. He ruined my family, took everything from me. But I also saw him do something worse. The villagers gasp, pressing him for more details. Khalid reveals that the man often visited the forbidden forest at night, returning with treasures and artifacts. But those treasures weren't his to take, he whispers. They belonged to the spirits of the forest. The elder declares that the only way to restore peace is to return the stolen treasures to the forest. A group of brave villagers volunteers to accompany her, despite their fear. The group enters the forbidden forest under the cover of darkness. The air is thick with fog, and the trees seem to whisper in the wind. The deeper they go, the more uneasy the villagers feel, but they press on, led by the elder. Suddenly, a low growl echoes through the trees, and the ground beneath their feet trembles. A spectral figure appears, a ghostly figure of an ancient spirit. Return what was taken, or suffer the curse. The spirit warns, disappearing as quickly as it came. The group reaches a clearing where an ancient stone altar stands. Piles of golden treasures and cursed artifacts are scattered around it. The elder gasps. These are the treasures he stole, and worse, he desecrated the sacred grounds. The elder and villagers carefully place the stolen treasures back on the altar. As they do, a strange wind stirs and the forest seems to come alive, its once ominous silence replaced by a chorus of whispers. As the last treasure is returned, the ground trembles, and the snake from the grave reappears, slithering toward the altar. It coils around the stone, its golden eyes glowing brightly. The curse is lifted. The forest falls silent once more, and the curse appears to have lifted. The air feels less oppressive, and the fog begins to clear. The villagers, exhausted but relieved, make their way back to the village. As the group returns to the village, they are met with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude from the other villagers. You've broken the curse, they whisper. But the elder warns the peace is fragile, and the man's sins have not been fully erased. Back at the grave, the ground begins to shift again. The white cloth that wrapped the man's body starts to rustle, as if something is moving beneath it. A faint, ghostly voice calls out, "Help me." The elder, sensing that the man's soul is restless, decides to perform a ritual to free him. She prepares a sacred offering and gathers the villagers for one final act to put his spirit to rest. The elder begins chanting ancient words, the air around the grave growing thick with energy. As she raises her hands, a faint glow appears above the grave, and the ground trembles. The villagers step back in awe, watching the ritual unfold. Suddenly, the ghostly form of the man appears above the grave, his eyes hollow and sorrowful. "I did terrible things," he whispers, his voice filled with regret. "I was consumed by greed and betrayal." The ghost begins to confess his sins, revealing how his greed led him to steal from the village, betray his friends, and dishonor the sacred forest. He asks for forgiveness. The elder approaches the spirit and speaks softly. "Forgiveness comes with true remorse. You must make amends before your soul can rest." The spirit nods, and the ground begins to rumble again. The elder tells the spirit that to find peace, he must make a final act of redemption. The stolen treasures must be returned to the sacred forest, and the man's wrongdoings must be acknowledged by the spirits of the land. The spirit, now determined, floats toward the forbidden forest. As he passes through the village, the villagers bow their heads in respect, acknowledging his attempt to redeem himself. As the spirit enters the forest, the trees seem to part in acknowledgement, and a strange, almost welcoming energy fills the air. The snake appears again, slithering toward him, its golden eyes filled with ancient knowledge. The spirit reaches the altar, where the treasures are still scattered. With trembling hands, he begins to place the stolen artifacts back onto the altar. As he does, a soft wind stirs the trees, signaling the forest's acceptance. As the last treasure is placed on the altar, a brilliant light engulfs the clearing. The curse that had plagued the village is lifted. The trees seem to brighten, and the air feels lighter. The spirit looks peaceful, his form fading as he ascends. With the curse lifted, the village returns to its normal, peaceful life. The air feels fresh, the sun shines brighter, and the villagers, once fearful, now live without the lingering threat. The elder, satisfied with the restoration of peace, returns to her humble home. As she walks through the village, the villagers nod in respect, knowing the elder's wisdom saved them all. A few weeks pass, and the village settles into a new peace. However, one evening, a familiar sight appears. The golden-eyed snake slithers back into the village, moving toward the grave. It pauses, then turns and vanishes into the forest. The elder, sitting on the steps of her cottage, reflects on the events that have unfolded. She understands that peace has returned, but the lessons of greed, betrayal, and redemption are never forgotten. As the first light of dawn breaks, the village wakes up to a new day, free from the fear of the curse. The villagers carry on with their daily routines, but there's a newfound appreciation for life and the lessons they've learned. One day, a traveler arrives in the village, hearing rumors of its cursed past. He asks about the strange events that took place, and a young villager tells him the story of Unveiled, the treasures and the spirit. The traveler listens intently and says, "There are many like Unveiled, consumed by greed, but not all get a chance to redeem themselves. His story should be shared, so others don't follow the same path." The grave remains undisturbed, the cloth-covered body now resting peacefully beneath the earth. The snake no longer visits, and the villagers believe the spirit has found its peace. But the memory of Armand's sins lingers in the heart of the village. The young villager who shared the story with the traveler begins telling the tale to the younger generation. "Remember the story of Armand," she says, "so we never forget the dangers of greed and betrayal." Years pass, and Armand's tale becomes a legend told throughout the village. The story of redemption, sin, and the snake serves as a lesson for all who listen. His grave remains a quiet reminder of the consequences of a corrupt life. The village, now thriving and peaceful, has learned from Armand's fate. Though the snake has long disappeared, the lessons of greed, betrayal, and redemption live on in the hearts of its people. The cycle of fear is broken, replaced with hope and the promise of a brighter future. Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.